Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, your guide to motorsports sponsorship. Here's your host, Josh Weesey.
Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by AMSOIL. Our featured guest today is Jake Coleman of the Dirty Duner Show. This was a fun episode because Jake and I got to talk for a long time about all the topics of sponsorship and specifically how it can relate to all the duners out there, whether it's a sandrail or a dune buggy or whatever the heck it is that you rip out on the dunes. That's Jake's audience, so we talked a lot about that, and he got to share his insights too, which is phenomenal. I have a few other things though before we get in the show I want to talk to you about. One is AMSOIL. I have been very impressed recently with AMSOIL's Runs on Freedom campaign. Essentially, what they are doing is making the world know that they have the right, you have the right, to run whatever oil you want in your new vehicle, regardless of what the OEM says from a warranty standpoint. So apparently there is actually a law out there that says an OEM cannot dictate what oil you run, what brand of oil you run, although maybe a dealer might tell you otherwise. A dealer might say you got to run our oil for us to, honor your warranty claims. But this law says that's not the case. It actually says if the OEM were to refuse a warranty claim based on an oil, or if they were to tell you can't use a different oil, then they have to actually pay for whatever oil they want you to run, which is interesting. So that's what the Runs on Freedom campaign is all about. I'm impressed that AMSOIL has stood up and said, look, we're not taking this. Guess what? There's a law. So pretty interesting stuff out there. I highly encourage you to check out that campaign. But the reason why AMSOIL is here with this show, partnered with us, is they want to make motorsports grow. They feel like, same as I feel, that one avenue to do that is by educating the riders and racers, helping them build their sponsorship programs so that they can attract and retain more sponsors, which means more money into the industry, which means more growth. That's why they're here. That's why I'm here. I would love to get your feedback, though. If you could head to iTunes, leave a rating review, that would be great because it honestly does a lot for the show. It allows us to continue to bring on awesome guests. So please do that, and then subscribe regardless of whatever podcast player you are on. Hit that little subscribe button. The reason for that is I don't want you to miss upcoming guests, and you might do it if you don't subscribe. It's easy to miss a show if you slip out of the social media scene for a couple of days and you missed a post. So I highly encourage you to subscribe. We've got Duncan Lee coming up next. Finally, I've been saying Duncan Lee's coming on forever. He's actually coming on next this time. Then we got Sean Whittingcomb coming up. And then one of our newest interviews, Ben White from Textron Off-Road. He is the sponsorship manager at Textron. So it's hard to find a better fit of a guest than that. But we do have another really cool guest coming up on our live show. Evan Schendel is going to be on from Polaris Razor. That's going to be next Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern. We just had Taylor Hyman, who was on October 15th at 9 p.m. Central, both on Facebook page. But Taylor just shared all of her recent knowledge about Pressbox MX and the Supercross series, and also on women in motorsports. Really interesting and really fun conversation. Now, this episode here is also brought to you by a few other companies. We have SolderWeld. They produce game-changing metal bonding technology. TopThePodium.com. They're experts in motorsport sponsorship. Bold Racing. They're a family race team. And GSP XTV Axle Specialist. Then there's Neverlift Racing. They create comfortable, race-inspired apparel. Crash Addict Industries. They provide human protection and extreme racing products. And then Racing Addicts, they are putting a whole new spin on networking and motorsport sponsorship. I also want to give a shout out to some of our other partners, including MBRP Powersports, MBRP Exhaust, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, and of course, GSP XTV Axles. Without further ado, let's hop in.
I'm excited to do this thing. I know you've kind of done podcasts with a few people.
Yeah.
And I've I don't think that. Oh, I guess I take that back. I did a little bit of a segment on the Bending Metal podcast where they kind of interviewed me here in my kitchen. But I'm excited we're getting this thing together, and I'm excited we're jamming out with this thing.
Yeah, I mean, me too. I've done an episode with Greg Thomas of Muddy Microphone Podcast. Even though he's actually not been doing podcasts anymore, he backed off. I need to try to bug him, get him back into it. But I did that show. That was a lot of fun. He's actually the reason why I got into podcasting, because he asked me to be on his show. When I was before I did anything with this show. But yeah, so I forgot all about that. He got me in the entire thing, and then the Diesel podcast, that was pretty cool. That's a legit group there, the Diesel podcast. Like, they know what they're doing.
Seems like they've got a well-oiled operation going on over there. I've listened to that one a few times. I'm into diesel trucks as well. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, they got a crew that runs that show there, and they got things on lockdown, so it's good stuff. But, man, we're here today to talk about this episode, though, this show, what we're doing here. So this is the Dirty Duner MASHUP with the sponsored Rider Club podcast. I've been doing that. I've been calling them mashups. It just sounds
I'm
fun.
Fine with that. I like that.
Mashups, But no, that's what we're doing today. And I mean, we kind of tried to do this not too long ago when we were at the Silver Lake Sand Dunes in Michigan.
Yeah.
Like, it was part of the plan, but there's just so much going on, and it didn't happen. But now it's happening.
A lot of the things I wanted to, so I met you obviously for the first time when I was in Michigan at Silver Lake, and a lot of things I wanted to accomplish that trip didn't happen just because of the circumstances where I was staying, what was going on, and the guys from Dune Stars, which would be a great company for you to have on your podcast as well.
Yeah.
They just they like to go all the time, 24/7, and so when I was out there at the dunes and you came out to hang out. It was like they wanted to go all the time, which in turn I went all the time. So
yeah, definitely. And my challenge that I ran into in that day was, I think I come up just for the day, which was not a good idea because it was one of the most popular weekends, and I should have known. I've been going up there for years. I should have known that I wouldn't be able to get in. So I ended up leaving my Razor at the Dune Stars place on a trailer, and I brought my truck in, which is fine. Like, I have fun with my truck too, but it's not quite the same as pounding out the miles in a Razor. But then later in the day, I did get in there, and I just rounded in circles all day. I just kept going and going and going. I wanted to get my usage in.
Definitely. And, I feel like out there, especially, where it is a drive for someone like you or, most people that go there is, you've really got to put those laps in and, enjoy your time while you're there. You don't necessarily want to slow down to, to do media stuff or to, in this case, I had a hard time slowing down to even sit down with Josh for 5 minutes. So.
Yeah, that's the truth, man. That actually gets me in trouble sometimes. We've talked about it on my show before, where people are, I don't know, you just get into what you're doing and you forget, like, oh, if I take a picture of this, then I can post that up later. Or, like, if I do a quick little video here, I can share that later. Or maybe I should actually talk to some of these people. You get so caught up in what you're doing and having fun, which is the point, that you kind of forget about all that stuff.
Well, and even going, into the podcast, how you run your show and how I run my show. One thing I've noticed about your podcast, Josh does the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, obviously, is you are so much better at keeping a structure. And, I'm not good at that. If someone goes on a rant, I'm going to let them go on the rant and then I might edit some of it out. But you are very good at, keeping it on track.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that there's value in both methods, because sometimes I worry I get a little bit too robotic, but I know that there's a certain amount of value that my listeners want to get out of a show, and if I feel like if I get it too far off, then I'm going to lose their interest to an extent. But I don't know, sometimes when it gets off and we lose track of time and we just start going on and on and on, those produce some of the best episodes.
Yeah, and and that's true. It can go both ways. I'm really excited that we're sitting here today because just this day or today, I had a good buddy of mine, on Instagram. His name is Walter Built. His name is John Walter, and John is he sent me and I should have sent it over to you. I didn't even think about it. He sent me his race resume for the upcoming. He wants to run the 1450 Truck Series for the NORA races. And so kind of one of our first topics here. I don't know why I'm so structured on this one. This is usually Josh's job.
Well, I mean, just to put it out there so everybody knows, Jake and I did actually have a quick pre-meeting. It was yesterday, right? So we did put a little bit of structure in. I don't know if that was for my benefit or for your benefit, but it happened. So we do actually have some structure to this whole thing. See, I let the cat out of the bag. Everybody was thinking that all of a sudden, you were a reformed man, and but no, so it's good. Go ahead, take over, man. You got this.
I'm not taking over in any way, but our first topic that me and Josh talked about was Duners getting sponsors. Mm-hmm. In this case, my buddy John, until this point, he's got this truck that he takes out to the desert and plays, and he takes it to some of the races. He took it to Jump Champs, and now he's looking to put here's that word again, more structure into his program. And to actually make it, where he can use this truck to go race, but also to go play. So I think that's a cool topic to start with and there's a good example.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that he just reached out too. I'm glad people are thinking about that. Honestly, if you're listening to the show, the odds are pretty high that you actually have a pretty good opportunity sitting in front of you. You might not have started taking advantage of it yet. So anybody who has something cool, I mean, like just about anything cool, but some sort of build or, a dune buggy or a truck or whatever it is, if it is cool and people like looking at it or paying attention to it or want to hear your story, you have an opportunity for a sponsorship right there. I mean, a lot of people are used to the old model of racers are the ones who can attract and retain sponsors. And although that model is still very strong and very true today, it is not the only option. I mean, backcountry snowmobilers are a great example. Probably 30% of my listeners and 30% of my guests are backcountry snowmobilers because they have found a way to get their gear sponsored and get their sleds sponsored and all the other little parts because they create content, amazing content that you can't see otherwise. And that's the same thing that I think the Duners have an advantage of. There's so many cool things that you all do just naturally that a lot of other people want to do and want to think about and want to imagine doing, and you can kind of give them that experience. Social media opens it up to that, but that means that you have people watching you and you have eyeballs and you have an audience, and that means companies are interested. There's a big market out there for what we call, and that's what we'll talk about this a lot in the show, influencer marketing. That is what sponsorship is. It is influencer marketing. That means you find people out in the world that have an audience, people trust them, they can influence purchase decisions. So, there's a whole, just about anybody out there that you can think of that sells some sort of product, like they fall into that category. So you as Duners can definitely take advantage of that category as well.
Now, Josh, do you think the key to, Duners, these are recreational people, do you think the key is creating that content? You think that's one of the biggest things with, a lot of my listeners that aren't necessarily interested in racing?
Yeah, social media has opened up a lot of doors for us. And one of that is content sharing, content creation. Now, most companies are going to be pretty excited about social media. Now, that's not always the case, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit more, but social media does give you that opportunity. But really, for someone who's in a dune scenario, a lot of that is the content creation. So great video, great pictures, because you're not going to have a huge grandstand watching you. Like if you're in a racing scenario, you're most likely having people just watching you go around and around and around, or you're doing some sort of track that they can pay attention to, or it's on television.
Yeah.
So in this case, you have to create and distribute that media, whether it's, like I said before, pictures or video. I mean, podcasting is another way of doing that. That's the way you've taken advantage of the duning world is through podcasting, so you can create audio.
Yeah.
But then the next thing too is traveling to places or shows with your vehicle. That gives you opportunity for eyeballs as well. So even if you don't have a strong social media following, and you have logos are very popular on vehicles, that's for a reason, because people look at it. So if you're at a show and you got your sandrail with some sweet logos on the side, or if you're driving there and you got your big toy hauler that's got a logo on the side, like that's an opportunity. Everybody who sees you on the road is going to now see whatever that logo is. You're a moving billboard at that point.
Yeah. Well, and kind of obviously, the door stickers or the door decals, door logos, or side panels, that obviously is, in my case, a fully wrapped trailer. That's a great way, I think, to promote those sponsors. Sticking kind of with, let's talk about like social media and video production or picture production. What's your opinion on phone content versus semi-professional content versus professional content? At what point do you say, I can no longer just do these videos on my phone. I now need to reach out to someone that can kind of come out and help me for the weekend. But also after, maybe I need to reach out to and pay a little bit of money to do this, because maybe I need more of a professional team to come out and follow me around and help me create content.
This is a really good question. I honestly don't think we've ever covered this on my show before, and I've done 110 episodes, but I have some opinions on it. And there's actually, if people want to like dive into this really deep, you can Google things like this, like, what gear should I use for creating content, and they'll give you some advice too. But really, my thought on this is you scale up your content creation and how much effort and money you put into your content creation based off of your audience target, and also what your sponsor is that you're targeting, or what they specifically want. So that means if you're starting off early, let's say you've got maybe a couple thousand followers, or you're starting to build some followers on social media. iPhones and some of the new Samsung phones, new Google Pixel, they produce pretty decent content. So at a minimum, you have something usually in your hand. Pretty much everybody listening to the show probably is listening to it on some sort of smartphone device. So that means they have the capability to produce decent content. There's free editing software out there where you can make it presentable. So I think if you're presenting something early on, specifically on Instagram, you can start with that for your page, like your main feed. You can do some of the videos like that, and then you can use your less curated, unedited videos in your story or any of your live things, because people aren't expecting the stories to be high quality. They're just expecting them to be real, behind the scenes stuff. So I think initially just get started with whatever you have, which is likely a phone, and you're going to be good to go. Now, if you watch some of the big time racers, you're going to see they're on the other end of the spectrum. And when I say big time, I mean in like a Jeremy McGrath or, Travis Pastrana, some of the people who are, 500,000 to 3 million followers on their social media, they are putting significant money into they're getting professional content created. They're hiring not just photographers, they're hiring film crews. In between there, you're going to see as expectations of your sponsors increase, say if they're giving you a bigger discount or if they're giving you more money for your program, you're going to start investing more money in equipment or hiring photographers and videographers to create and edit your videos. So I think it's all a scale. I wish I knew like the cutoffs in between there to like recommend where they should start doing that. But you should be able to tell based off of your social media engagement. As you get more and more social media engagement, likely people's expectations are going to increase of the quality of the content. So if you start seeing a decrease in engagement, then maybe you have to question your content quality as well.
And it's kind of it's a double-edged sword / gray area. Look at someone like Blake Wilkie.
Yeah.
Blake has been a guest on the Sponsored Writer Club podcast. You are a lot better at, obviously, of remembering the number of shows, but also been a guest on my show a couple times. Blake is very, very active on his story and on his posts.
Yes.
But when it comes down to it, when Blake wants to put together a very cool production or something that he wants remembered, he goes out there, he spends the money, his hard-earned money, and he hires a film crew.
Yep.
Or he hires, a buddy to follow him around and get the day-to-day life of Blake.
Yeah, that's a great example, actually. Blake got his real start by making a video that was a decent quality. He had some following before, but he went out and made his urban assault video, and he had good equipment, and he had someone with him as part of his team. And we talked about that. Well, it's probably you talked about it in your episode too. Mine was 98. If people wanted to go back and listen to that episode, it was awesome. Actually, that was my number 2 most downloaded episode. But yeah, we talked through that. He put in the time, the money, and he still does, right? He did Urban Assault too. So when he's ready to like lay it down, he makes it happen.
Well, and then like I said, it's a gray area though. On the flip side, my 2 most engaged posts, which got to put my hands together, they're both in Michigan. My 2 most engaging posts though were 15-second videos that I put together from my iPhone.
Yeah.
So, what gives in this situation?
Yeah, I think it's all about the expectations of the people who follow you and how real things feel to them. Because there's we know one of the most viral videos in motorsports, I think, ever was probably the Larry and Tyser snowmobile video, right?
Yeah.
So that was poor quality content that just happened to go viral, right? And it launched him. This is actually kind of funny. I was at Heydays this year. For people who don't know about Heydays, it is the main snowmobile event of the year. Everybody who's a snowmobiler is at this event. And I was talking to, in my opinion, who are the top snowmobilers in the world. And they are like, holy cow, Larry and Tyser's here. He's the most popular snowmobiler in the world. I'm like, what? What? But that was low quality video, and he skyrocketed. But it seemed very real. It's personable. You can connect with it. So it just, I don't know. It's tough. I think it depends on who your listeners are and what you're trying to target. Some of the people who sponsor him they're not wanting him to produce a real high quality content, but that's his brand. But if you look at, say like a Blake Wilkie or, Jeremy McGrath or Travis Pastrana, keeping with those same examples, like their sponsors might be saying, no, I want you to create this specific content because I'm also going to then be putting it on our page, or I'm going to be putting it on our website, in which case I want that really good quality stuff. So it's, I don't know. I just encourage people to not overthink it and get started. Let your audience kind of be that guide, and go from there, because there's a lot of examples of how it works in both ways.
I definitely agree with that. And, it kind of goes along with, I think I'm going to have Josh back on to get his story of, his experiences in the off-road industry, snowmobiling industry. But, it goes back to starting a podcast as well. If you want to gain followers, if you want to gain sponsors, just start putting the work in. and that's kind of how I was when I started a podcast. I didn't know what the heck I was doing.
Yeah.
I just kind of started it, and you'll see as you go through, for those that are listening, Josh's listeners, my listeners, as you go through and start putting content together, you'll kind of realize what looks good on Facebook, what looks good on Instagram, and what looks crappy. If you can sit there and watch your own video, that probably means it's good. But I've had some little videos I put together, and I'm like, I don't even want to watch that.
That's exactly right. And you and I, people don't know this, but you and I talk a lot about like tips and tricks about podcasting and how to, make our shows better. And we were just talking about this the other day around editing. Like, I know you and I both used to do a lot more editing than we do now, but the reason for that is in some cases it's actually kind of fun to see some of the mistakes or the stumbles. It makes it a little bit more realistic. So sometimes you have to look at it, is the quality does it really need to be as good as it is sometimes, or is it really more about let's be real, let's be personable? And that is a tough one. I mean, honestly, if you go back 15 years, maybe 20, I don't know, before reality TV really hit the market, everything was expected to be high quality, like top notch. And now there's this divide almost. So if you look at the film industry, right? If a movie, I love superhero stuff. So let's just talk about like Infinity War, the movie Infinity War, Avengers Infinity War. Amazing CGI, amazing graphics, just beautiful quality. If that show, like any little slip up in that movie from a quality standpoint, is going to get hammered. Like, the people are going to hate it. But you watch a reality TV show, which are also very popular, and you see people, they're unscripted, they're look maybe a little bit ridiculous, maybe the camera quality is poor at times, but it's like it's still gets people excited. So I don't know, it's a tough one.
And sticking with on the topic of quality, I've got to give a huge multiple rounds of applause to Josh. He does, you do a great job with the quality of your podcast, and I know that's something that you've worked really hard on. And it's just the differences in the shows. I have some shows that I kind of cringe when I listen to them, but the content is still there. Josh's shows all have the content and his quality is good. So I got to give you a round of applause while we're talking about this, because, I'll compare your movie or your podcast to this beautiful CGI production like we're talking about, and we can compare mine to the reality TV show.
No, I'll give you that $20 later. I'll wire it to you on PayPal for that plug.
I use Venmo.
Venmo. I'll Venmo you then. No, I mean, I think that I just really encourage people to try it. If you like what you see, put it out there, because it's really about being true to yourself. We talk about that on my show a lot. I asked like these top racers and these athletes, what's the biggest tip that people should hear? And almost all of them say, be real, be true to yourself. So if you feel that you relate more with something that's really polished, then put it out there, because it's going to be a better representation of you. If you feel like you want to be, a little bit more rough and like some sharp edges, whatever, like put it out there, because that's more you. I mean, Larry and Tice are right. That was his video. If anybody hasn't seen it, go watch it right now. It's him jumping this old beat up snowmobile, but like that matches his personality. That matches his brand.
Yeah.
It is what it is, and it worked for him. But if I went and made that same video, nobody would care. Right? Nobody, even if I made it at that same day and at that same time, nobody would care, because that's not me.
Yeah.
So.
No, and I get that. I don't want to keep going back to him, but some of the stuff that Blake pulls off, Blake Wilkie, or even 4x4 Barbie, you know,
Yeah.
4x4 Barbie, a guest on your show.
Yep.
You know, some of the stuff that she puts out, I'm like, that's her personality. Like,
Right.
I could not pull that off.
Right,
So,
right. And actually, it's funny you mentioned 4x4 Barbie. Her episode was the number 1 most downloaded on my show. So her and Blake both are the top 2, and they both know it too. I've been trying to get them to play off each other, like that little competition to get them promoted. Every now and then I'll message Barbie, and she's like, "Oh, Blake's catching me," and she'll put up like a post on it, and I'll get some more downloads. But a little trick there, a little podcasting trick. But
there you go, man.
but yeah, and I did want to actually hit on too, just for the Duners out there, like with this whole content creation thing. You know, take these pictures, take the videos, and get them out on social media. Even if you don't have a big social media following, I still think it's helpful to have it there. I mean, so let's say if you got 500 followers, get it out there, because if anything, even if it doesn't attract a lot of followers, and even if that's not your goal, it's a good way for people to connect and find you. So companies. And I see this a lot in motorsports. They love Instagram, but like companies will do the same thing. If they see your vehicle, they might say, "Oh, I want to know a little bit more about this." Or if they see you, "I want to know more about you." They will search you on social media. It's crazy, but it is what it is. It's a way to get noticed, even if it's not your primary avenue for content sharing. Maybe it's going to shows as your primary avenue, but if you just have a presence. I think at a minimum, I recommend you have a presence.
Well, and you know what's funny about that is, you know, I have these experiences quite often is, you know, I'll reach out to a potential guest of my show and, you know, I'll explain who I am. I'll say, you know, these are the times that I record. You know, I'm willing to work around your schedule. And usually within 24 hours, I'll see their name. So-and-so liked your photo. So-and-so liked your video. You know, and it's the same thing with companies like you're talking about. You know, if these companies are interested in you, they will go on your Facebook. They will go on your Instagram. If it's their marketing guy, if they have a designated social media guy, and they will go on your Instagram or your Facebook, and they'll make sure that you're not, you know, posting pictures of you going out to the desert and, you know, dumping trash or stuff like that. You know, they make sure that who they're getting behind is someone that will represent their company well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So, first off, I really encourage people to do this, right? Get a presence out there, and I really encourage that people get interested in this whole sponsorship deal, because it is a great way to allow you to do more with the thing that you love, right? Because money is very important. Let's not deny it. Money's a big deal, and this sport, our sport, is very expensive. It's one of the most expensive things that anybody does out there. I remember somebody telling me about that they play hockey. It was like Little League hockey or something, and they like, yeah, it's so expensive. I was like, ha ha ha. Oh, that's so cute. That's so cute. Like, yeah, it's like $500 for what? For like, you know, your oil change and your checkup in your vehicle? Like what are you talking? No, that's for everything for the year. Yeah, don't talk to me anymore. But yeah, so that's why this whole thing is important, and that's why I hope people get excited about it.
And with, you know, I spent $500 just taking my toy hauler last weekend. You know, it's like
so true.
But you know, it's all for me. It's priceless. You know, because you know it's making memories with my family, but as well as, you know, pushing me to create more content. That word again that we are talking about. You know, it's pushing me to create, you know, better content for my guests, for my listeners. So
yeah, definitely. All right, I'm gonna break into the interview to take a quick minute to thank the sponsors for this podcast. I hear it constantly from racers that a good suspension setup is absolutely critical for performance, and that's why I'm going to talk to you next about Bold Racing and suspension. Now, it's really critical to understand your suspension, and there's so many intricacies with the valving and the shims and all this crazy equipment that you need to actually, you know, rebuild and properly set up your suspension, that it's really important, if you're ready for that next level of performance, to partner with an awesome suspension company. Now, Bold Racing is that company. They're not only specialists with their suspension setups, but they also partner with companies that produce amazing custom components. And on top of that, they're a family race team. They actually race themselves, so they really understand the type of beating that your vehicle and your shocks can take. So what I want you to do is give them a call and just chat with them. Talk to them about suspension. Their number is 702-506-5354. If you're not ready for a phone call, go ahead and shoot them an email, bold.racing@yahoo.com. Safety is our overriding priority. I hear it all the time, but I have to ask myself, is it though? Is that the first thing we think of? Is that the first thing you think of? Over the past couple of years, we've seen the performance of production UTVs increase, somewhere around 350%. That means these machines give us a lot more opportunity to have fun and win races, but it also, unfortunately, gives us new opportunities to crash. And that's why we have partnered with Crash Addict Industries. The owner, Travis Pointer, became very accustomed to crashing early in his career. He saw it as inevitable, and he set out to make the process safer. With a passion for racing, welding, and engineering, Crash Addict Industries now produces full cage and other protection systems intentionally designed to protect you during an accident on the track. They also offer a line of human protection products through their vendors. Do this for me at this point. If you're racing with a stock cage right now, please go check out CrashAddict.com and at least see what they have to offer. Even if you choose to go with a different company, please make safety your overriding priority. 2 questions I get continuously about this show and about sponsorship is, do I need my own website and do I need a resume? The answer is, in my opinion, yes to both, and that's why we partner with TopThePodium.com. Now, if you want to see an example of what a professional website and what a professional resume looks like, you got to check out TopThePodium.com. They did my website. The Sponsored Rider Club Podcast website is SponsoredRiderClubPodcast.com. That was created by Jeff Vanistall of TopThePodium.com. I think it's awesome. I get a lot of good feedback about it. And there's a number of other websites out there that Jeff has produced that are just phenomenal. So I think it's important in this world of social media where you have control of your content. That's what a website does. It gives you full control. We don't know what Facebook's going to do sometimes. We don't know what Instagram's going to do. We don't know what Twitter's going to do. So if we don't have that central location to direct people and house our content, there is some risk that we incur. So I strongly recommend getting a website, talking to TopThePodium.com. And then the resume, again, is massive. And if you want to stand out, get it done professionally. And honestly, it is one of the best ways to step up your game and present yourself in the best way possible. Look, I'm sorry, but I got to admit something. I like to look cool. I like to wear high-quality clothing. I like it to be comfortable. And I also like it to portray the values that I also hold true to myself. That's why I like Neverlift Racing. So they were founded in 2013, and they are all about high quality, comfort, and looking cool. So, like I said before, exactly what I'm looking for out of clothing. Admittedly, my favorite shirt of all time is the Neverlift Racing silver badge t-shirt. Like, I wear this thing probably too often because way too many pictures of me on social media are wearing this shirt. Either way, they have a ton more out there. So go get your shirt, your hoodie, your hat, and actually your socks. Probably one of the most comfortable pair of socks I've ever owned too. And they got pretty cool things where it says never on one side, lift on the other. Really cool stuff. Get your apparel. Wear something that supports your values. Live fast, drive hard, Neverlift Racing. Are you ready for an entirely new approach to motorsports sponsorship and networking? I'm assuming the answer is yes, because why else would you be listening to this podcast? We are excited to be teaming up with Racing Addix. They are legitimately questioning and challenging the status quo on sponsorship. Once you become part of their network, they will first off sponsor you directly, but then also help link you with other companies who are dedicated to making motorsports better and providing you with additional sponsorship opportunities. This is crazy stuff. If you're excited about this, then join the club. Your next step is to head over to the social media and find Racing Addicts, give them a follow, and stay tuned for what's next.
What's up, everyone? This is Mike Pasquarella, founder of Desert Vets Racing. When the team goes racing, we always have our SolderWeld products with us. Keeping the cars in the fight is our number one concern. With SolderWeld, we can do that. SolderWeld is a leading company in the U.S. for aluminum repair. They specialize in radiator repair on the fly. If you're stuck in the middle of the trail or a race with a whole new radiator, oil pan, or canister, or even an aluminum line, you can fix it right then and there in a matter of minutes with their AMSOIL aluminum repair rods and flux. It's the only complete and lasting fix in the off-road community. SolderWeld's new UTV off-road kits fit in every ride and are easy to access on the fly.
SolderWeld continues to make a huge positive impact on this industry. So I really encourage you, get in there now. Go to solderweld.us. Check out their products because this stuff is changing the game. Okay, so you want to hit the next piece now where we talk about the discounts and what a sponsorship really is? Because I think that's a big challenge.
Absolutely, man. I was just saying, let's move into that one because we kind of talked, Josh threw out some numbers in our pre-talk of, what he sees with sponsorship deals. And so let's go through and kind of talk those.
Yeah, so when people say the word sponsorship, it's a huge word, and there's a lot of things that go along with it. There are different venues, or I guess there's different values that you can see for sponsorship. Sometimes it's actually $0 too. I mean, that's not something that you and I had talked about earlier, but sometimes it's just hey, I really want to build a relationship with your company. I really like the products that you use. I will promote it for exchange, maybe for some other, like cross promotion.
Yeah.
So that is one avenue, and that's a good way to kind of get a relationship built. I will tell you though, just right off the bat, one of the things that can disadvantage you early on is undervaluing what you're worth. Meaning, let's say you put this massive logo on the side of your sand rail and you don't charge anything for it and you get very little cross promotion. You just potentially took up the biggest opportunity that you had for creating a lot of value for you down the road. And ultimately, you may have also, stifled other people from getting sponsorship themselves because that company is now looking at you. Well, I can get this for free. Why would I go down the road to this other person? They're going to charge me, $1,000 for this. So that person now lost because you've undervalued what you're truly worth. So that's part of it.
It's painful to think about that because I see it so often, as I'm sure you do.
Yes. It's a big issue when you start getting into the deeper levels of sponsorship, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But like as you start creating more and more value in, say, a race circuit, and you see someone else come up fresh and they have all these logos and they're paying everything out of their pocket, they've just devalued the sport. I mean, they're not doing it on purpose. It's not like people are doing this maliciously, but it is overall saying, well, as a sponsor, I don't necessarily need to fund these programs anymore. I can find these people that are not as successful, at least initially, and I can get exposure for free. And ultimately, that's not a win-win for everybody. The right sponsorship program is a win-win for everybody, right? You find the thing that the company can afford, and that is going to grow their business, and it's also going to grow your program and then help you be able to afford to continue to get better. But so that's just my first, public service announcement on the caution that I think you should take with this. But yeah, I hear a lot of numbers that come out of the sponsorship game. It can range from a 10% discount, like a lot of sponsorships start off with a discount, a part package discount. 10%, and then sometimes it grows to 25%, maybe it's 50%, then it escalates to free product, and then it turns into free product plus some sort of dollar value, some payment plan. Now, when you get into the higher levels of sponsorship, that dollar value, I mean, some people on the show, they have $100,000 packages. So they'll have maybe 2 or 3 vehicles or whatever it may be, whatever they're racing or whatever they're riding. And then they also have some $100,000 package that they put together. And at that point, like, we're talking big money and a lot of deliverables and contracts. But, ultimately when things first start off and you're building that relationship, you might get an opportunity for a 25% discount with absolutely no contract and, very loose expectations, which is a great opportunity for you to now set your own expectations and then exceed whatever those expectations are. And then the next year you go back to that sponsor again and they're like, oh, well, you were running my tires last year at 25% discount. You created a bunch of value for us. We think you sold 10 sets of tires on yourself. How about this year you get a set free? Okay. I like where we're heading.
Yeah.
And then that can continue to escalate over time.
Well, and definitely, like you said, it's you just nailed it. It escalates over time, and prove your worth. That's kind of what it is to me. Is like proving your worth to this company in the first place, and prove it right out of the gates. And then these companies definitely will take notice of that.
Yeah, you just hit on such an important point. If you come into this, whatever this first conversation is, with too big of a head, you're done already. So
yeah,
this happens so much. So on my show, for people who don't know, I interview businesses as well, people who make decisions about sponsorship, and they get this pitch all the time, like, "Hey, I'm fast," or "Hey, I'm cool," "Hey, I've got 1,000 followers. Give me free tires." And they're like, ha ha ha, like, that's funny that you just said that. And then the other people are like, oh, I wasn't joking, like, I'm really that amazing. So that person, they're on like the list, they're on the blacklist, they're not going to get sponsored by that company. And guess what, motorsports, it's not that big overall. Everybody knows everybody, and those things get around pretty quickly. Like, oh, hey, did you hear such and such just reached out to me? Yeah, what'd they say? Oh, they just automatically expected me to give them free tires. Ha ha ha. Horrible ego that this person has. And like, oh, well, I'm putting them on my blacklist too. Like, this stuff happens, right?
Yeah.
So, don't assume that automatically you're going to get to that point. I think it's better to approach it as a humble thing. I think it's better to approach it as, how can I partner with you? And this is how I think I can help you, before you talk about anything you get. Like, it's all about them. And if you happen to get something out of it, great, right? That's the win-win, but it shouldn't start that way.
Well, and someone that comes to mind as we're talking about this is another great guest on your show. He might have a hard time not swearing though, but is Rick DeWeese, Dune Whore. And when Rick came on my show, that was one of the first things he said. He goes, I want people to know that, I pay for my stuff.
Yeah.
I don't expect the support. I pay for my stuff. And he goes, the reason that I pay for my stuff is because as a consumer, I still would like to have an input, where if you are sponsored by a company and it's not working out well, or, if you're sponsored by a company and that the product that you have keeps on breaking, you're kind of expected by the company, by the corporation, to still support it. And so, that was one of Rick's points was, I pay for my stuff. And if these companies like the way that I think about it and they want to support me in certain avenues, on certain streets of this build, that's great. But he goes, in the beginning, I call, I order, I go to the website, I order like a normal person, I have it delivered to my, doorstep. And I think that's kind of a big point and a big thing with a lot of people is, if a company say, for instance, comes to you with a 25%, sponsorship deal. They want to give you a 25% discount on their product. Don't sit around. Get on there, because get on their website and order the products that you need, because then they're going to see that you are eager to run that product.
Yeah, that you just hit on another really big, I think, challenge with the whole sponsorship game. If you are sponsored by a company, there are expectations that you don't openly badmouth that product. Like,
yeah,
you can't avoid that. That's the case. They're paying you to essentially be a sales rep or a marketing rep for that company. Even if it is a discount, that's still money out of their pocket. And they're paying you. You're now an employee essentially of that company. So that creates that can create mistrust from your followers, because if you never say anything bad about the product, right? They're like, well, I don't know if I really truly believe this person because they're paid to use whatever this is, so they're never going to say anything bad. I think that's a reality, and it does happen. But I will tell you, there are some ways to navigate that. I've seen a couple people do it, I think, well. But there's some ways to navigate that where you still get the feedback in a constructive way. So one of them is actually NBRP does this. And NBRP is one of my sponsors too, but they will take their exhaust and put it in a racing application, and they'll basically tell the racer, like, right afterwards or after the race or whatever, I want a complete download of everything that's wrong with this thing so we can go make changes. So they do it more as an R&D type sponsorship, which kind of gives you that voice. It's just not as public. So they'll do it with prototype samples, and they'll do it with maybe early runs of exhaust so that they can take that feedback and make changes. So in which case, you can get that voice, it's just in a different manner. The next one who I think really does this good is actually, if anybody follows like a Dirt Tracks television or Snow Tracks television, if you ever pay attention to their shows, they're sponsored by a lot of the big OEMs. So they'll have a Yamaha, they'll have Skidoo, and they'll have Polaris, all be their sponsors. And they'll do shootouts with the vehicles. So, maybe they have, let's say it's BRP. Like, let's say they have a Can-Am Maverick, and they've got a new Razor, and they've got the new YXZ Yamaha, and they're doing a shootout at the dunes. Which one does the best, right?
Yeah.
You would think like they're not going to badmouth any of their sponsors because they're all paying for it, but they have to deliver feedback on which is the best one, which one won the shootout. So they will pre-negotiate with their sponsors to say, look, we are going to say pros and cons. That's all there is to it. And we're going to rank which one is the best and which one's the worst. So you're getting exposure, but please note that we're not going to violate the integrity of our assessment just based off of our business relationship. And the companies are like, agreed, let's do it. Right? But they have to specifically say that. And that's part of their contract, and that's part of the way they've structured their show. Most people don't do that, right? Most people are not. They don't even have competing sponsors. They're definitely a lot more controlled in most cases. But I think that's a way to still have the voice and still say what's on your mind without necessarily turning it into a bad mouth situation and not going against the sponsor's trust.
Yeah, and I can kind of relate to that too. I work in marketing for an RV company, mm-hmm. and for this RV company, we have 4 main manufacturers that we carry their product, and and I'm kind of wanting to do a comparison. Let's use a 27-foot toy hauler as an example. I'm wanting to do comparisons with each one. Unfortunately, there's 4 27-foot toy haulers. Unfortunately, the sales reps or whoever we deal with at those companies all have different personalities, And I've gotten the green light from 2 of them, and 2 of the other ones have said, nah, we don't want to be compared to those other ones, those other brands. And so, you know, in this world, in this day and age, I feel, and this is throwing in social media again, with social media where something could go on social media within, you know, 30 seconds, you have to be completely open and honest. And, you know, as you're talking about, you know, Dirt Tracks TV or Snow Tracks TV, where they, you know, kind of support multiple brands or are sponsored by multiple brands, you have to be honest. If a product sucks, don't say it sucks necessarily, but say, you know, this is the downfall for the 2019. You can be graceful about it. This is the downfall for the 2019 model. Hopefully they address this in 2020, you know?
Exactly. And you can give that feedback to the company, right? And you can tell them, like, here's the challenge that I ran into. And then you flip it. You can flip it now and say, look, we ran into these challenges early on in development where such and such was going wrong. But the team is so committed that they fixed this thing and it's so much better than it ever used to be. Or like, hey, the next generation of this one just came out. You know what it did? It solved some of the challenges that we saw with the first generation. And I think that's, I don't know, I think that's helpful. Another thing that I just thought of is a lot of sponsored athletes do product reviews for their sponsored product, which is great because now they're giving the pros and cons in a fairly objective manner. Now, I just saw one of these a couple days ago. They were doing it for, it was actually a snowmobile brand. They were only talking about one brand. They were not talking about the other one. So it was purely about this. In this case, it was like, I think it was a jacket. You know, they were specifically talking about this jacket. But they were saying, like, here's the good things that we've seen about this jacket. This is how it helps me. However, here's some of the downfalls. If you need these things, if these things are critical for you, this might not be the best jacket for you. But, like, that's still going to sell jackets because it's reducing the anxiety that someone would have about buying that jacket because now they know more of the details. But it's never a bad mouth situation. Now, when it turns into bad mouth is like this happens with racers. You know, they, of course, after you lose a race and you're a competitive person, that sucks. Like it's no fun to lose a race and especially when you're competitive. And then guess what? We interview these racers right after they lose, like seconds after they realize that they lost, and sometimes they're like, something broke, right? Oh man, I had my clutch went out, and you know this thing is just, we've just been struggling with this clutch all year, and nobody can get it right. We're not getting the focus we need. The parts are garbage. You're like, whoa, you just lost your clutch sponsor, but because they're mortally offended by what you just said. But like, so that's not the way to handle it. But the better way to handle that situation would then be, yeah, we had some challenges. You know, we got to go back to drawing board. We got some, you know, we did have some clutch issues, but we got a team that's dedicated to figuring out. Great. You go back to that team. You say, how can we solve this? If they're not committed to solving it, you know, you need to sever that relationship, right? You've got to believe in the product that you're trying to sell, or else it is not going to work. Like, people will, if you're trying to hawk some, I don't know, I keep going back to tires because it's just an obvious reference, but like, if you are trying to hawk some crappy, like, sand tires to somebody and you know that they suck, like, switch sponsors. You don't even have to badmouth them. Just switch sponsors because you don't believe in it. You don't believe in it. You're not helping them any. I don't know. Yeah, that's a tough one to do, but if you don't believe in the product, you need to sever that relationship.
Well, so you're talking about like switching sponsors or severing a relationship. And, you know, this is, I really feel right now to kind of talk about this because, you know, one of Josh's big pushes with his show is to, you know, retaining sponsors. Mm-hmm. But say that, for instance, I'm going to give you 2 examples right here. You know, one is you talked about, you know, switching sponsors. The other example is that a company comes to you and said, hey, you know, we no longer want to sponsor you. Mm-hmm. So how do you handle those kind of situations? Because I could see that happening a lot in the in the recreational world, in the Duner world, because, maybe we'll have great content for a year, and then maybe the next year, we'll only get out to the dunes once or twice because we've got a new job or we've, life changes, stuff like that. So, when a sponsor cuts it off with you, or when you cut it off with a sponsor, how do you handle those?
That's probably the trickiest thing that people run into. Let's start with when a sponsor cuts off the relationship with you. And this does happen, right? You just mentioned a couple of examples of what would trigger that. Another thing is people's budgets change, right?
Yes.
Motorsports industry is a recreational pastime, which means that when the economy's bad, the budget gets cut out of that. That's just it is what it is. But yeah, if a sponsor contacts you, and let's say you've been running some of their product for a year, and they say, hey, we're no longer going to support you in the following year, you need to accept that feedback as positive as possible and thank them for the support that they have given you. There's two reasons for that. One, I think it's just the right thing to do as a decent human being. Two is this year. You don't know what's going to come next year. They might still want your support, or that person that people switch companies all the time within motorsports too. So the people who make decisions about sponsorship at one company next year could work for a different one. So let's say that someone contacts you, hey, we're cutting off your support. Our budget ran tight this year. I apologize. And you're like, thank you. I appreciate your time. I still want to run your product. It's great stuff. Now that person switches maybe to another company. Maybe it's a completely different type of product. They know you, and they're like, wow, this person really knows how to handle, negative feedback or a challenging situation. That's who I want representing this brand. So now all of a sudden you find out that you picked up a completely new sponsor in a new industry because you handled a severed relationship really positively.
And I think, as you're talking about this, it makes me think of Jim Riley, which I think he talked about this on your show and on my show. So obviously, he believes in it. But, I think he talked about even like a personal experience where someone had dropped him as a sponsor. He was super, super bummed about it. And they went to another company and picked him right back up with that other company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it does happen. People always say with motorsports, it's like the 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon. Like everybody knows if you know 6 people, you'll eventually get to Kevin Bacon. Well, they say in motorsports it's 1. So like if you know one person in motorsports, likely you have some connection to everybody else. And I think that's pretty true. It's small enough and tight knit enough that these people, they hang out together. They talk. They switch between companies. So I think that's part of a way to handle it. Someone cuts your budget. And actually, you bringing up Jim Riley is a great point. Everything I'm saying here is not stuff that I've made up. It's stuff that people have taught me on the show. I've done 110 shows now, and every one I learn a little bit more about what is expected. So yeah, Jim very specifically said that. And Jim is one of those people. His program, when you run a trophy truck program, we're talking big dollars, right?
Yeah.
Big dollars. A prep for a trophy truck, even if you already have one built, is $50,000. So it takes some serious business savvy to figure this stuff out. So we like paying attention to Jim Riley for that reason. Plus, he knows how to run Kettle One vodka, and he knows how to run Baja United and Azul Tequila. He's got this stuff figured out. But yeah, the next thing though is if you want to sever a relationship with a sponsor. So I think everybody pays attention when big time racers switch between their factory rides. They go from Yamaha to Honda or whatever it may be. People really pay attention to that. They also pay attention to the smaller changes too. So I think you have to be careful in the way you navigate it. I think that's one of the benefits of not bad-mouthing other brands either, is that you may one day actually need their support. Now, if you truly don't believe in that brand, then whatever, don't ever go after it. But I think you have to be very transparent with the company that you're leaving and also with the company that you're coming to. Hey, let's say if you're we'll just stick with the tire thing. Hey, BF Goodrich, you guys have been great. I really appreciate your support over the past 2 years. I love your product, and I agree with everything I said in the past. However, I do have a new opportunity with General Tire. They reached out to me. I really love their tire too. I think they make a great product. I'm going to be making this change. I think it's better for me, blah, blah, blah. And you sever that relationship in the most mutual, controlled way possible. And then I think you have to share something like that with your fans too. Hey, BF Goodrich supported me for these years, and they were fantastic. I'm really excited for this new opportunity, though. General Tire is also an amazing company, blah, 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 blah. So I think that you have to handle it with poise. Again, the same challenge comes into place here. If you sever that relationship in a negative way, there is a very high likelihood that person is going to be working for another company in the future, and they're not going to be willing to support you anymore because maybe you're flaky or you can't deliver negative news very well, whatever it may be. So I think those things definitely play in. The next thing that plays in is you have to be cautious of how many times you jump between sponsors, because people pay attention to that as well. So if every year you have a new tire company, now people are going to be questioning, like, does he just like all tires? Are all tires just amazing? So then you start losing some credibility, and people are less likely to pick you up as well. That's where, when we talk about on my show, attract and retain sponsors, the ultimate goal is you attract the sponsors that align with your values, and then you ultimately can retain them for a long period of time. That's when you've really, I think, done it the right way.
Well, and you've brought up like 3 really good points out of this thing that I want to kind of touch back on a little bit too. Is a few minutes back you talked about how your sponsorship program, it's a business. So if you're with your sponsor, if you are getting free product and another company that you also believes in offer and has the same values as you, it's all about being yourself, being true to yourself. But if another company reaches out to you and one product is giving you free product, and the other company reaches out to you and says, hey, we want to support you through 2019 and 2020, and we want to pay you and give you free product. Mm-hmm. It's a business at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And if you can dissolve a sponsorship or a partnership with someone, and the reason, you're being true to yourself still, because it's not necessarily that you're hating on that product. It's, at the end of the day, your sponsorship program, it's a business. You've got to, do what's best for your program. These companies, unfortunately, it's the cold hard truth. They're going to go out and they're going to find someone else that they want to give their product to, or support people with their product. So as long as you leave on good terms and other companies can see that you've left on good terms, I don't think it's all about being true to yourself and, having being loyal. I don't know what the word I'm thinking of here is, but, don't burn your bridges.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And there are examples out there. We've had them on this show before. I can remember actually one very specifically. Brandon Tedizzle Cox, he's a backcountry snowmobiler. He originally was with HMK, which is a snowmobile gear brand. I'm also with HMK. And the owner of HMK, if anybody ever wants to meet a cool guy, like Kirk Zach is that guy. But both Kirk and Brandon both told me a similar story about each other. So Brandon used to be with HMK, and he made a switch to 509 and moved away from HMK. But he did it so professionally. Him and Kirk still hang out. They still ride together. Like, they're still friends. They both talked about each other on, like, when I talk about it, like, oh yeah, how's Diz? That's what they call him, Dizzle. How's Dizzle doing? Like,
yeah.
that's pretty amazing. But not only from the athlete perspective, but from the sponsor perspective. Like, Kirk is amazing for that kind of stuff, and those are the people that you want to work with, right? You're like, okay, this person not only is going to support me in some of my business ventures, which you're right, this is a business.
Yeah.
They're only not only going to support me in that, but guess what? They're also going to support me if I choose to make a decision that is ultimately better for me in my business. I'll give you another great example, just building off this Kirk Zach thing. So with my show, I have the opportunity to bring on competing brands as guests, or athletes who use competing brands as guests. So I specifically brought on a company, 509, one of the creative director at 509, which is David McKinney. I brought him on the show to talk about what 509 looks for in sponsorship. And before I did that, though, I called Kirk at HMK. I was like, hey, man, look, I got an opportunity to bring, a pretty high-profile guest on the show, but guess what? They're from 509. And Kirk is like, look, man, I get it. 509 is a great company. He's like, I know David. He's super sharp. He's like, why would I want to take away the opportunity for your guests to get his knowledge just because it's a competing brand? He's like, whatever. He's like, do it, man. And he's, I'll listen to the show. I'm like, man, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. But now I'll tell you the flip side of that. Let's say I didn't tell Kirk and I just brought David on the show. Now it's getting a little sketchy, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm no longer being transparent. So Kirk's probably looking at this show. If I would have done it that way, Kirk probably looks at the show as like, huh. I mean, I like David. I like 509 as their competing brand. But like, wait, they're competing brand. He didn't even talk to me about that, right? It's a whole different story.
Definitely. And, and in this industry, there's always going to be competing brands. Whether you're more in Josh's industry, more of the snow industry, but there's always going to be competing brands, and every brand you can see, a lot of these brands, especially with social media now, you can see how the brand is run and, how much support they have.
Yeah. And honestly, the competing brand thing too, it can get you in more trouble other than just that way. So I'll tell you a big one is any sort of we'll just say energy drinks and apparel can easily get you in trouble. So let's say, yeah, you know where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you're sponsored by Monster Energy. Great. That's sweet. That's one of the things that people really pay attention to is Monster Energy. And you are at an event with, maybe it's media, maybe it's not media, maybe it's just people walking around taking pictures, and you're holding the Red Bull can. Somebody's going to post that up, and that thing might go viral, right? And you will be getting a call because you are representing Monster. It is not the time to drink your Red Bull. It's just not. So that can get people in trouble. It also happens a lot with clothing. So if people have a specific clothing sponsor, and a lot of times when you get in these bigger packages, you are talking about contracts. So if you are wearing a competing clothing brand let me say gear. So let's say Fly Racing is pretty big in the off-road world, and I'll just stick with 509 because 509 is breaking in the off-road world. So if you are sponsored by 509 and you are wearing your Fly Racing gear, and someone takes a picture of that, someone's probably gonna be upset. And I get it. If I'm paying somebody to market my brand and they're wearing the competing brand out in public that, it's an issue. But guess what? It happens. People don't maliciously do this stuff. You just forget.
Yeah.
And that's going back to your comment too, from Dune Horror. If taking on sponsorship creates so many opportunities, and it can ultimately reduce the financial burden and allow you to do a lot more things, but it also creates new responsibilities. You now have a responsibility to a company that you didn't have before, and you have to now think about these things when you didn't have to before. So,
it's kind of, I have a good example of that as well. I do have a clothing sponsor for the Dirty Duner Show, Dune Therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So a few months ago, when I first started the Dirty Duner Show, I thought, oh, it'd be so cool to put together a brand, with the Dirty Duner Show. Obviously, I don't have time to do that. So Dune Therapy came on as a sponsor. Love their product. Love, everything they're doing. Well, a few months ago, I thought, I think I just want to make some hats for the Dirty Duner Show. So I felt obligated, to reach out to Nate at Dune Therapy, the owner, and say, hey, man, I don't want to step on your toes. I'm still going to wear your product. I'm wearing it at every event I go to. I'm taking live videos with it. I'm taking, photos with it. But I'd like to do something, a little bit of branding on my own brand. And Nate kind of said to me, hey, I appreciate that. And I understand that. And even going further, if you would like us to help push your hats, we will as well. So if I just would have popped up in a video and he'd be like, oh, well, Jake's making hats now. I guess he doesn't need us as a sponsor anymore. No. Right. I still need them as a sponsor. I still want them as a sponsor because I believe in what they're doing and I love their product.
Yeah, that's a great example. And actually, to build on the hat thing, and this is something you can relate to. So when we were at the long travel weekend, Silver Lake Sand Dunes in Michigan, I forgot a hat. And I normally have a hat with me. I love my hats, and I forgot my hat, and it was super sunny, and I was, I've got a pretty strong receding hairline, so there's a lot of fresh skin up there I don't want it to have exposure to the sun. Either way, well, Wilkie's there, right? Blake Wilkie's there with Shreddy, and they got some sweet hats. So I'm like, I'm going to go pick up a hat because, one, they're cool, and two, it's hot out and the sun's getting on my skin. So I buy this hat, and I was literally, I took a picture of it, and I put it up on my social media feed. Right, 5 seconds after that, I was like, oh no. Because Neverlift Racing Apparel is one of my sponsors. They have been for a long time. They actually make Armor Coat as well. So typically on the show, if you're listening now, you've probably heard the Armor Coat commercial for a year. Now I'm also very actively talking about Neverlift Racing. Well, I emailed AJ Schmidt. He's the owner, and I was like, dude, I just put this up. I'm so sorry. Is this a problem? I will delete it right now. I felt horrible. And, AJ was like, no, he said, I'm perfectly fine with this. And he's like, I know that brand. And he's like, it's a strong personal brand. I think it's differentiated enough for mine. Basically, he said, no big deal. Yeah. I was like, that's cool. But I was kicking myself for not thinking about that ahead of time. But it's you don't. It's not like I was maliciously doing that either. I just didn't think about it. And I do a show to teach people to think about that stuff. And I still screwed it up. But yeah.
Well, definitely, man. And I think, it just, at the end of the day, it's, you brought this up multiple times. It's being true to yourself. And, at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for you as well. If that means, in your case, you had to go buy another hat from another brand, you took care of your business on your end, checking with your sponsors that they're okay with that. That's being true to yourself. That's, that's also, covering your tracks, but that's at the end of the day, like I said, that's being true to yourself. So I think it's just how you, excuse me, it's thinking of things, and it's also, just keeping track of your P's and Q's and just being smart about stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to, just like you said, you teach people on your show to think about it. Just think about stuff before you speak. We'll go a long ways with your sponsors and your potential sponsors.
Yeah, one thing that I do, I ask a question on my show quite a bit. I'll ask, if you could sponsor anybody in the world, who would you sponsor and why? And my point in asking that is to put the guest in the position of a sponsor, so that they can feel the same things that a sponsor would feel. So I encourage people to do the same thing. That's how you can think of what is right or wrong. Think, how would this person respond, or how would I respond if I was in this person's shoes? So that what I did immediately after I put that up, I was like, if I was AJ of Neverlift Racing, I would be furious. That was what I thought about in my head. I was like, if I was him right now, I would be furious. And now he wasn't, but that's what made me take action. And I think that's a good way to kind of gauge what you should do in a situation, or how you should treat a sponsor, or how you should handle them. Like, well, how would they feel if I did this?
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're at about an hour and 10 minutes, and I don't know where you want to take this. There's been so much fire in this last hour. Like, I don't know if maybe we want to call this one and pick it up at another time, because I could see us obviously doing this multiple times, but let kind of this stuff soak in with both of our listeners. And what direction do you want to take this, Josh?
No, I think that sounds good. I mean, I encourage people, if you want to know more about sponsorship, go check out this show, Sponsored Rider Club Podcast. There's also a number of other podcasts out there that cover sponsorship periodically. So I know Jim Beaver covers it periodically in his show, which is either Down and Dirty Show or also Project Action. He'll cover it from time to time. When you have people on your show, they bring up tips and tricks. So pay attention to that stuff. That's kind of my direction for now. I think alternately too, the internet is a huge resource. There are ways you can learn about this stuff outside of the podcast. So, Google it, how to become a sponsored racer, or how to become a sponsored rider. You'll find information that way. But I think ultimately, if I left anybody with anything from this show, give it a shot. Like, see what happens. If you're ready for a new set of shocks and you have a somewhat of a social media following, and you know that people pay attention to your vehicle, maybe try reaching out to the shock manufacturer and just feel them out. So I just try to build that relationship. Maybe it'll work for you, maybe not, but I think it's worth giving it a shot. So I think it's okay if we kind of close things out now, and if people have questions, then we can follow up with another episode, or they can obviously reach out to me or you with for more details.
Well, and I want my listeners to hear as well. Everything that Josh just talked about is stuff that I believe in. I'm somewhat, and I think you are too, I'm somewhat picky with the guests that I have on this show. Mm-hmm. And, it's not an ego thing. It's just, you've got to find the guests that fit in with your crowd and fit in with your listeners. But I really would like to, and I want to hear the feedback from the listeners of both shows.
Yeah.
Listeners of both shows, Sponsored Rider Club Podcast and the Dirty Duner Show, would you guys like to hear, an episode like this with me and Josh, maybe quarterly, maybe every couple months? And,
right.
I can throw it in mine as a bonus episode or whatever. I think this is going to be great information for, anyone in the industry, your listeners, my listeners. But at the same time, like, I think that with two people like me and Josh, me and you, that we need to do this more often.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the mashup thing, it's a blast. I mean, I love this stuff.
And I've got to congratulate Josh. I know Josh just put out a post the last couple of days, 30,000 downloads. That's a huge accomplishment. And I know you're killing it, dude. I know how hard you work on the Sponsored Rider Club podcast.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's a funny thing doing these podcasts. Like, at a certain point, you're like, I do want downloads. And at a certain point, you're like, does that even matter, right? Because I get these messages periodically where someone will say, hey, I changed my sponsorship program because of something I heard on your show. And I'm like, man, if I did all this and just one person benefited, that's worth it, So if I had one download and one improvement, like that's phenomenal.
And I get the same feeling too. I kind of have the marketing sales hustle, and when I have one of my sponsors say, hey, these are our numbers for this month, and this X amount of numbers was from the Dirty Duner Show, I'm kind of like, oh, okay, I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to go another month. I'm going to go 4 more episodes. So
yeah, man, and I'll just give you the props too. You've been crushing it. I mean, you connect very well with your audience. I've seen you hustle as well. So for people who don't know this, like when you were at the Silver Lake Sand Dunes, like you were hustling the interviews and you were going and doing the rides. You came back, hustled the interviews, and like that stuff it's real. I mean, I say this on my post sometimes, like hashtag podcast life. Like the hustle is real, but so I appreciate what you do for the community too. And honestly, your podcast came out and like, made huge waves, and it brings more listeners into the entire sport. So I appreciate you doing that, and then also involving me in that, because there's this great thing called edification, right? You grow, I grow.
Definitely.
The Diesel podcast grows, motorsports grows. Like, that's what we're here for.
Absolutely. Now, Josh, I know you end your shows a certain way. So do I. Do you want to end this thing with your little tagline? I'll end it with mine.
Let's do it. So yeah, thank you everybody for taking the time today. Have fun and ride safe.
And I just say, stay dirty, Duners.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by AMSOIL. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss upcoming guests. We have Duncan Lee, Sean Whittycombe, and Ben White, who is a sponsorship manager for Textron Off-Road, all lined up. Go ahead and follow us on social media, and specifically pay attention to our Facebook page where we do our live episodes. We just had Taylor Hyman on with us October 15th, and she rocked it out. We talked about women in motorsports. We talked about her new company, Pressbox MX, and some of the great interviews she did at the Monster Energy Cup Supercross Series. Really good stuff there. Evan Shendel is coming on live on October 22nd. He is one of the marketing reps for Polaris RZR, so do not want to miss that one. Join us on our Facebook page at 9 p.m. Eastern, at 6 p.m. Pacific. To get some insider access to upcoming guests, go ahead and check out the Sponsored Rider Club on Facebook. Go ahead and find that group, search it out, request to join. I review those requests, and if you like motorsports, and I can tell that from your profile, I'm going to approve your join. It's a great way to make connections. We just had somebody in the group ask a question on there. They said, hey, how do I get a hold of Alpine Stars? And then Jay Simmer from Racing Addicts saw that, actually drove in to Alpine Stars, which he lives by, and got the contact email and then gave it to the person who asked the question. So, like, how do you beat that? Good stuff. All right, special thanks goes out to our sponsors, AMSOIL, Neverlift Racing, SolderWeld, Bold Racing, TopThePodium.com, Crash Addict Industry, and Racing Addix. I also want to shout out some of our other partners, GSP XTV Axles, MBRP Power Sports, MBRP Exhaust, HMK USA, and Stud Boy Traction. I look forward to serving you again next week. Until then, have fun and ride safe.